awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
nothing, I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box set's curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
something I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
something I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
It's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
Something I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
It's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
And welcome everyone to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue MacDonald and I'm the curator for Maternity and Midwifery Hours, the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening's session, where we've got a lovely speaker who has been with us before, which is lovely, and is in the news a little bit too, and is also in publication phase as well, and that's Leah Hazard. So welcome, Leah. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Now, what we always do to our guests is ask them to share the moment of the week. So you're no different. Please, do you have a lovely moment to share?
I do. Thank you, Sue. Thanks for your warm welcome, and hello to everybody who's watching at home or work. So my moment of the week is actually midwifery related. It isn't always, because midwifery does not always spark joy, but this week it did. Some of you may know that here in the UK, student midwives are activating at the moment because there's a big employment crisis for newly qualified midwives. I think it's something like roughly 1 in 3 newly qualified midwives cannot find a job in midwifery, and many of them are going on just to go into other sectors such as hospitality, retail, whatever other jobs they can get, which is obviously not what people train for. So anyway, more to the point, a fantastic student midwife called Sophia has organised a kind of demo / protest / gathering in front of Parliament in London on the 3rd. I'm just looking at my diary, which is next Tuesday. Yep, that is a Tuesday. And so she was invited to come on BBC Radio 4's Woman's Hour programme on, I think it was Monday morning, with the host Nuala McGovern, and also alongside the CEO of the RCM, Jill Walton. And my moment was really just listening to Sophia speak on this programme, because I know from experience how intimidating it can be to actually go into the BBC and be in a studio and then have thousands and thousands of people listening all around the world, and also the professional pressure of wanting to be safe and say the right thing and not get in trouble and, all the rest of it. And she was just wonderful. She was so articulate, so engaged and engaging, got all her points across really well, didn't come across nervous at all, and was just a really excellent sort of model for a student midwife in our country today. So that made me so proud and inspired. And I was saying to you, Sue, just before we came on the call, that there's not advocating for themselves so beautifully. So yeah, it was a really special moment.
That was a lovely moment to share. I mean, actually, Sophia also spoke at the festival on the 11th to remind people about the student midwife sort of gathering on the 3rd of March. So I'm going to repeat the 3rd of March. If you're free, midwives, students, mums, anything, come along to Parliament Square Gardens at 4 p.m. Now, I've been to these sort of events before, and it is inspiring, and it's also very warm, and it's not like an ordinary kind of demonstration. People talk, say what's happening, and you learn a lot, and you do get inspired by these lovely student midwives and midwives who'll be there. So put that date in your diary if you can. Now I'm going to just move along as one does, and let Leah have a moment or two before she comes back on screen, and just remind people, because I know there'll be people, our old friends with us, not old in the old sense, but old friends with us who've come in this evening, but also some new people, because you thought, oh, this sounds an interesting topic, let's come along. So welcome to all of you. We started the Maternity and Midwifery Hour actually 6 years ago, coming up in March, during the first COVID lockdown. And that was a means of making sure that student midwives and midwives had a sort of connection. Actually, anybody in the maternity services. We did at that time have paediatricians, obstetricians, and mums joining us as well, which was lovely. And initially, we talked a lot about COVID and what people were doing about COVID, increasing their knowledge about it, also understanding the different service changes within clinical service and also within the education sector, making sure students were safe, but also getting their experience, which they needed. And that whole time was a bit scary, and sometimes it's difficult to remember, and then you'll see some of the signs on the pavement that's still there and think, God, I remember queuing up to go into Tesco's or whatever, and having the mask on and all of that. I think we learned a lot of things, and we also learned that things like the Zoom webinars are really good for that connection. So we've carried on because it seems as though people still want to have this weekly event. And I just also need to reinforce that everything the Maternity and Midwifery Forum does is recorded. So if you have a power cut or you have to rush off in the middle of this, you will be able to catch up. And we always make sure that that's possible, you know, so you can access things afterwards. Also, everything is recorded and kept by Matflix. So if you need to catch up with things you might have missed in the past, you can do that. And it's a fairly small subscription, or if your institution or your trust are already subscribing, it's all free, which is great. Little health warning, which I always give: once you go into that Matflix and start looking at some of the presentations, it's a little bit addictive. 2 hours has gone by. Very useful for those of you looking at revalidation or doing a project or doing work for university work. There's so much information there. You're spoiled for choice, really. Perfect. And we do like you to share. So this evening is going to be, I think, a mixture, a bit of challenge, a lot of interest. You're going to really enjoy this, I know, because Lee's a fab speaker and you will want to share with your colleagues. So do so, please do so. We'll send you the link after tonight, and also a podcast for those of you who like either driving along and listening to this, or if you're a little runner, you can listen to the podcast as you go. Now I'm going to go on to the news. The news, now we were discussing this before we came on. Baroness Amos's gathering of information for the maternity review has closed now. That inquiry is meant to report sometime in the spring. I'm not sure exactly what spring means in this context. It might be up to May, June, I'm not sure. So we'll have to wait for that to all happen. And as Leah pointed out, the big thing is jobs for student midwives. That has been a lot in the news, and it's good that it's being shared in the news. And again, Leah and I were having a chat before we came on, because it seems to me crazy. We all know we need more midwives in the service, doing the care, ensuring quality of care for mums, their babies and their families. We know they need that care and that love and support, and we need more people. And then you hear students aren't getting jobs and are being told they're not going to get jobs, which is so negative for people when they've been working really hard for either 2 years or for 3 years if they're on the direct entry pathway. Really hard. And we know also from research, and we always work with research, that if you don't practice pretty soon after you qualify, it's incredibly difficult to get into it again. You lose your confidence and kind of those skills that you need. So we also, as midwives, those midwives here, need to be aware of that. For if you have students coming in, maybe they've been qualified for 6 months and haven't got a job, and they come in, we need to make sure they're looked after and supported in getting their confidence back and their skills. So I'm going to repeat: Student Midwives event, 3rd of March 2026, 4 p.m, Parliament Square Gardens. And you'll meet the lovely Sophia, who was on the radio the other day. You might meet, I'm going to say a call out for Felicia, who I met at the conference as well. I met so many lovely students. And like Leah, I was really inspired and delighted that their energy and their passion for what they were doing in midwifery, which is fantastic. Now, the other thing, it's kind of my moment of the week. I went to the Welcome exhibition at Euston, and if anybody is in London at Euston and has half an hour to spare, check out, there's something called the Birth Expectations, and it's a birth scroll from 1500. And that's kind of medieval time, and it's a kind of wrapper. It's a scroll with lots of pictures and writing, and it's very precious. And it was something that women would use in medieval times to wrap round themselves to protect themselves from sort of evil spirits or whatever, and from harm. They're also, and that was very fantastic. You can't touch it, but they did have a copy of one that you could touch, and it was so interesting. And then you could look up, because it's all in Middle English and Latin, and got little pictures of things like the nails from the cross and that sort of thing. But they also have lots and lots of information, so you can understand a bit more about these scrolls. And also there were some fabulous Ethiopian birth manuscripts with blessings and prayers from 18th and 19th century, and they were just beautiful. And it just shows you the sort of things that are so precious, and those would have been really precious to women, but there aren't that many around. I'd never seen this sort of scroll myself, so it was very interesting, and it's all free, so get along there. And there's a nice cafe there. I didn't go there, but it did look very nice, coffee and cake, so it might be a treat if you're in London and you just have a spare little time till the 18th of April, that is. Now, this evening, we're looking at safer delivery and working hours and conditions and midwives' wellbeing. And we know there's been a lot of media attention on women and their babies and families and what they're experiencing in the maternity services. And that's very right. We need to focus. That is always the centre of our care. But we also need to look wider at why things don't go so well and what's happening within maternity services from a midwife and student midwives' point of view, and looking at, what's the full story? What about this working over the hours? Have any of you worked over your hours? Yeah. Have you skipped breaks? Yeah. Have you found yourself covering for colleagues because they're not there, there's not enough staff? Yeah, I think so. And so I'm really so delighted that Leah Hazard, who is raising these issues in a very meaningful way and has got a fantastic petition going. And if you haven't signed it, you better get on with it. As I said, Leah's known to us, has been with us before, and she's a practicing midwife. She's also a best-selling author. She's also an activist and a mum, and she's a very proud member of the midwifery profession, passionate about bringing midwifery and reproductive health into the public eye. And that's sort of informed some of her writing, I know. And as a firm believer that midwives, using as a foundation for lifelong wellness, she's committed to providing evidence-based information in an accessible, nuanced, relatable and relevant way. So welcome, Leah, and thank you so much for coming this evening. The screen is very much yours. Now, I also have to say, before Leah comes along, there are some resources online. They may not have quite come yet because it's my computer's problem. It's got stuck somewhere. And I noticed that Leah, I didn't mention on her links that she sent us, her 3 books that she's done, which I would recommend you get hold of, saying Hard Pushed and The Womb. No, it's just Womb, isn't it, Leah?
Yes, it's just womb, but the womb works as well. That's fine.
Oh, welcome. Now the screen is yours, and I'll back off now.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thanks for that warm welcome. And yes, I am known to you. I've had the pleasure of coming on here before, so I really appreciate the repeat invitation and the welcome back again. And thank you also for everybody who's out there watching. Couldn't continue with my advocacy and my writing and everything I do without the support of the wider community of midwife students and parents around the UK and the world. So it's much appreciated. So you'll be, I don't know, hopefully pleased to know that I have no PowerPoint presentation tonight, not for any particular reason other than that I prefer just to talk, and I'm just really going to be sharing the story of what's been happening with me and this campaign over the last few months. So it's just easier just to share that with you without having a very formal presentation with charts and graphs and learning outcomes and things. For those people who prefer PowerPoints, feel free to imagine that I have one. Draw your own, stare into space, play on your phone, that's all. That's all absolutely fine. I won't be offended because I won't know. The only sort of added input you might have is you may hear my dog snoring because my French bulldog is at my feet, as he is with all of my online meetings and business. So you might hear some noises off from him. So yeah, without further ado, just a little bit of an introduction to me for those of you who don't know who I am, which is, let's face it, most people. That's absolutely fine. As Sue mentioned, yeah, I've qualified as a midwife. I've been a midwife since 2013. It was my kind of second career. I had a very unglamorous career behind the scenes in Pelly before that. I'd also worked for 6 years as a doula before doing my training. And then since 2013, I've worked for NHS Scotland in all different clinical areas, rotating through, various units, wards, hospitals, and mainly for the last kind of 8 or 9 years, my home has been in maternity triage, which, as many of you may know, is like A&E for pregnant people. We see absolutely everything, the weird, the wonderful, the normal, the not normal, you name it, it comes through the doors. And during that time, I've kind of accidentally fallen into this role of, I don't know, professional big mouth public activist, advocate, whatever you want to call it, really after the release of my book Hard Pushed that Sue mentioned, which was published in 2019. Now that book was very warmly received at the time because I think there was a lot of good feeling towards midwives, and I do find myself reflecting frequently now that I don't think I could bring out a book like that now, because sadly midwifery has the public perception of our role is very different now and not always so favorable. When that book came out, it seemed to resonate with a lot of people in the public who were much more interested in hearing about what midwifery nowadays is really like. And I started to get a really active, kind of engaged community on social media as well of midwives and student midwives who wanted to share their experience and what that was like. Subsequently published my next book, Womb, The Inside Story of Where We All Began, which is more of a kind of journalistic, popular history, popular science look at the most miraculous organ, the uterus, what it does, how we manage it, medicate it, celebrate it, and legislate it. And following on from that, I've just become, professional media big mouth, write quite frequently for various papers and magazines and pop up on the radio now and again. So I'm here tonight to talk about a really unexpected development in my career and something I wasn't looking for and just kind of organically happened over the last 6 months. And that was the campaign to raise awareness about midwives' working hours. Now, when this all happened, so we'll take back to kind of October, November of last year, I was working away as a midwife. And I've also been busy writing my next book, Birth Wars, which will be published early next year by Penguin Press. And so I had a few things to do already, but something came on my radar. So many of you may remember that kind of October, November time last year, there was a lot of reporting in the media about the inquest into the tragic deaths of Jen and Agnes Cahill at the home birth of Agnes in Manchester in 2024. Now, baby Agnes was born at home, and she and her mum Jen both had various kind of critical emergencies at the time of birth and were transferred to hospital, and very sadly they both died. And so the reporting into the inquest was very sensationalist. There were lots of assumptions published about Jen and her reasons for having a home birth and her birth plan and why she had done this, and lots of assumptions about the midwives and their competency. It was very inflamed kind of coverage, which always makes me bristle because as somebody who works inside the system, I know that most of the time when you read about birth and maternity in the paper, it's very different from what's actually happened. So I was kind of following this. It was kind of on my radar. And then one day I was sitting here at this desk, just noodling around on the computer, and I saw that the actual coroner's report from the inquest had been published and was available to the public. So I had some time and I thought, well, I'm actually going to sit down and read this because I want to know minute by minute what actually happened and was this different from what's been presented in the press? And boy, was it different. It was completely different from what the media had made it out to be. All of the events were vastly different from what you would have assumed reading the media coverage. And I'm not going to go into that report in detail because anybody can read it. You can search for it. And I think it's one of the links that I've sent to Sue that she might be able to share with you all. It was clear that there were numerous mistakes, failings, missed opportunities throughout Jen's pregnancy and also during and after Agnes's birth, and not going to go into them. But one thing that really, really stood out to me was it's just a line or two in the report. And it notes that the midwives who had attended Jen at home had been awake for more than 30 hours, 30 hours, by the time they completed that whole episode of care and events had concluded. Now, we'll just let that sink in for a moment. So anybody who's done a night shift and not slept well the day before or at all knows how you feel. And it is not only awful, but as evidenced by copious research, it causes significant cognitive impairment. It's kind of akin to being over the legal alcohol limit for driving. It affects your decision-making, your hand-eye coordination, your memory, your communication, your verbal skills, pretty much every cognitive and even physical function that you can imagine is impaired by fatigue and exhaustion. So the midwife in me thought, my God, how could these women even have been expected to provide critical life and death care, whilst being so exhausted? And then the home birthing mother in me, because yes, I had my second child at home, also was horrified because I thought, well, I wouldn't want somebody who was that exhausted to come out and attend me at home because it's not safe for anybody. So I kind of let that sink in and kind of reeled from it. And then I thought, well, is this normal or is this really exceptional? It sounds exceptional to me. As I said, I've worked mainly in hospital for, my midwifery career. I've not been in a home birth team. I've not covered home births as a community midwife. I've not really been on call as such. So I thought, well, I'm going to ask the audience. And I'm really lucky that on Instagram, I have a really engaged and active community of mainly midwives and students. So I just put a little kind of question box in one of my stories, as you can do, saying, I've read this in the inquest. Is this normal, guys? Is this happening? Are you often being awake for 30 hours or more, or called out all night after working all day? And I quite simply was just deluged with the responses. I just couldn't keep up with how fast they were coming in. It was truly overwhelming. And I've never had a moment like that in my career or my life, really, is that suddenly the floodgates had opened and midwives, confidentially, I wasn't sharing anybody's details or personal information, but midwives were messaging me privately and saying, yes, absolutely, this happens and this is the norm. And the stories that they were sending me fell into kind of few kind of categories, if you will. So there are hospital-based midwives like me who aren't getting their legally protected breaks during the day, which is dangerous enough. You don't want to be delivering life and death care for 12 and a half hours without having time to eat or pee or just sit and catch your breath. Then there were midwives who were on call for home births, as in the Cahill case, who were saying, yes, very much, this is the norm for us. And then there were community midwives who were on call to cover staff shortages in the hospital. So what they would call sort of for escalation. So they would do their clinics and visits or whatever during the day, and then they could be called out to do a whole other night shift actually within the hospital in delivery suite or some other area that was short-staffed, and then expected again to do their community duties the next day. So I'm not going to read you all the stories because we don't have time for that. I have probably about 200 of them at this point. And I've shared many of them. In fact, I've shared some of the worst ones really on my Instagram page. So if you're interested, just find me at Leah Hazard, all one word, on Instagram. But I'm going to read you just a couple here so you can get a flavor of what I've received. So here's one, and again, these are all anonymous and anonymized. None of these contain anybody's personal information or should have any identifiable details in them, but they have been shared with consent. So this person says, I've just seen your most recent post, knowing I'm on call and I'm already filled with dread. I work from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. in community, and then I'm on call from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. overnight. At some point in the past, I knew I was going to be called out at 8 p.m. to a home birth, which I attended. The lady delivered at past 5 a.m. and then had a catastrophic multiple emergencies, redacted, and emergency maneuvers had to be performed to keep her alive en route to hospital. At this point, when the emergencies happened, both me and my colleague felt so ill with tiredness, neither of us knew how to even start postnatal care, not even realizing what we were about to deal with. We didn't get home until past 11 a.m., meaning I'd been awake for over 28 hours. I was then ill the whole next week with an upset stomach, which happens every time I'm called out. The anxiety of knowing I'm going to be working whilst so tired makes me physically ill. And I have dozens of messages that are almost verbatim like that. And the really uncanny and desperately unjust thing is that this story is almost exactly what happened to Jen Cahill. And her midwives were out all day, called out again all night, emergency in the early hours. I think Agnes was born around 5 or 6 a.m. and transferred to hospital. You know, how many times does this have to keep happening? It's so sad. I'm going to read you another story about somebody who is based in the hospital, just so you can see that it's an equally acute problem for people who work hospital-based shifts. She says, I didn't want to publicly comment for fear of being seen as a troublemaker within my trust, but I wanted to bring this to wider people's attention. I worked in community for many years, so I'm well versed in the all-day working followed by all-night on-calls, etc. I moved back into inpatient care a year ago for my own mental health. However, I am now regularly expected to work a 12-hour shift without so much as a drink or a toilet break. When bringing this to the attention of seniors, we are told, welcome to midwifery. It's unacceptable, and I am passionate about seeing a change in this toxic culture. I cannot and will never understand how my husband, a delivery driver, cannot drive his van if he hasn't had a break. Yet I can have 2 to 3 lives in my hands and be unable to have a break. I'm exhausted and genuinely sad about it. And this midwife brings up a really good point. There's a vast double standard between midwifery and other safety critical roles. So when this all started happening, I thought, how can this be the case? How do other safety critical professions deal with this, and what are the protections? Well, in theory, midwives, along with any employee in the UK, should be covered by the working time regulations. And again, I'm not going to go into the detail of those regulations. It's one of the links that I've included that Sue can send to you if IT cooperates. But essentially, yes, we should have protected breaks between the shifts and during the shift itself. But for certain, shall I say, male-dominated safety critical professions, the law goes much further. So if you work in aviation, if you're a pilot, if you're a cabin crew, if you work in the railways, if you are a bus, coach, or HGV driver, you have even more stringent regulations about exactly how long you can fly, drive, work on the rails, and before you must take a break. And it is very stringently enforced, and it's just embedded into the whole culture that this is for everyone's benefit and breaks are non-negotiable. Yet somehow, and on my philosophical high horse, I'm going to argue that this is embedded in misogyny. Women's work for other women, predominantly, is not held to the same standards. When a midwife says, no, I can't do that, I'm not safe to do that, I'm too tired, that no is not respected, right? Because what do we know, right? We're just expected to keep giving and giving. And, you know, in many cases we do, but it's unsafe. And this is the thing, it is unsafe. Because many of these stories, and some of them I can't even share because they're so horrific and identifiable, many of these stories actually detail the harm that has come to patients and also near harm because of staff being so exhausted. And on top of that, the staff themselves have come to significant harm. I have dozens of messages from midwives who have suffered severe health complications during long shifts without breaks, who've had pregnancy losses, who've had really significant mental health issues, trigger warning, suicidal ideation because of working these long shifts with no breaks, being unsupported. So harm is being done because of these unsafe working patterns. So I'm just watching the time. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to what have I actually been doing about it? So all of these stories were coming in, and I was just walking around with all of this in my head. And I thought, this can't be right that I now have all this information about this harm to the public and to midwives. And it's just staying inside my head. I have to do something about it because as midwives, we're bound by the NMC Code of Conduct, and part of that code tells us we have a duty of candor. So when we know there's a danger to the public, we actually are duty bound to speak up about it and to escalate it. So I thought, well, this isn't just a matter of I'm just going to run to the tabloids and talk about this. Not at all. I need to escalate this to the people who can actually raise it on a significant platform. So I took this to our union, the Royal College of Midwives. Didn't quite get the response I had hoped for. That's kind of another story for another day. But it was clear that I would have to kind of pursue this on my own. I started a petition on change.org, which you all can still visit and sign, and that's another one of the links. And the petition basically asks the government to consider establishing a role-specific, legally enforceable cap on midwives' working hours. And that petition now has over 41,000 signatures, I'm pleased to say. Was able to get some good publicity around the campaign when it first started. So we had an article in The Observer and in The Independent, and I was invited to speak on Women's Hour as well, which was great. And there was a lot of momentum, I think, and it was almost as if, you just had to crack open the floodgate, and then midwives felt seen and validated and able to tell their stories, and boy, are their stories. There are many. So what else happened? Well, I also submitted freedom of information requests to dozens of trusts around the UK. I tried to do all of them, but some of them are quite fiddly and difficult to find and inquire. Dozens of trusts with a list of questions specifically about, are your midwives protected by the working time regulations? Are they required to opt out of those regulations as a condition of their employment? And sadly, the answer to that is yes, in many cases. Yep, that's a whole other shocking aspect of the story. In some trusts, midwives are told if they want a contract, they must opt out of those protections. And then they are asked to sign a document saying they have voluntarily opted out. So if that's not coercion, I don't know what is. I've also asked the trusts how often are midwives called out all night after being working during the day. Many trusts couldn't even provide that information or were unwilling to provide that information. I asked trusts, what is your standard operating procedure for relieving a midwife who is too fatigued to continue working safely? Virtually no trust has a standard procedure in place for escalating that and managing it. And what became really apparent as all these responses came in, I think I've got about 18 or 19 now, is that there is no UK-wide standard for auditing compliance with the working time regulations, and there's absolutely no mechanism of accountability. So nobody is actually, checking the trust's homework, as it were, to say, yes, your midwives are getting their breaks, or yes, your midwives are getting the protections they should have under law. It's just not happening. So that's become another sort of dimension of the campaign. It's not just the law about working hours, but it's getting people to understand that at the moment it's just a free-for-all. It's just there's absolutely no audit or accountability as to whether or not midwives' human factors are being respected and their breaks are being given as they should be by law. So I have tried to go down the legal route a little bit in some ways, bearing in mind I'm not an expert in employment law. This is new to me. I'm not an expert in any of this, so I'm learning as I go. So I had a few chats with some excellent human rights lawyer and an employment lawyer, and both of whom were very adamant that there were definitely human rights violations for both the midwives and the service users in this scenario. and that there would certainly be the potential for midwives, if they wished, to look into some kind of class action lawsuit against trust or trusts because of the working practices that are occurring. So again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal expert. That's not me saying do this. That's just what I was told by solicitors that I've spoken to. So there was concern there. I've also written to various members of parliament, and I have a template letter on my Instagram, if you kind of go back through my account, that you can also use to write to your MP. And I had a really productive meeting with Carolyn Harris, MP for Swansea, who's done a lot of work around menopause care and women's health generally in the NHS. She was really interested, and I've given her a briefing document and some more information along with my file of stories. So we're going to see if that goes any further. And I'm really pleased to say, just on the kind of legal government front, that I've managed to incorporate working hours into a plan that's been developed by the National Maternity and Neonatal Collective, who are feeding into the NHS England maternity review led by Baroness Amos. So this collective is a group of over 100 grassroots organisations and individuals who we've co-produced a plan based on our own expertise and lived experience, suggesting some issues and the corresponding solutions. We're just going to kind of deliver that to Wes Streeting and Baroness Amos. We're actually meeting with them next week in Parliament. So I'm really pleased that working hours are central plank in the staff wellbeing aspect of that plan. Whether that actually goes any further, I don't know. And this is the thing, just in the last few minutes, you might be thinking, well, what next? Like, where does this go next? What's going to happen? I'll be completely honest with you. I have no idea because, as I said, when this all started, it didn't happen by intention, right? Like, I wasn't thinking I'm going to start a campaign. I know exactly where this goes. The stories just kind of fell in my lap. I didn't have a plan. I thought it would be great to change the law, but let's be realistic, it's probably not going to happen. So in my mind, just raising awareness of the issue, helping midwives feel seen and validated, starting the conversation, and, to some extent, inserting it into these governmental plans and conversations is probably as successful as it's going to get. I don't have a huge high profile that I can kind of rustle up 100,000 signatures, in a couple of days, like some people can, and more power to them. This may well be sort of almost the end of the road for this campaign and what it can achieve. But I think, if anything, I really hope that it has helped midwives feel like their experience is real, because a lot of people wrote to me and they said, until I started hearing these other stories, I thought maybe I was imagining that things were this bad, or I just didn't have any choice but to work this way. And I think that there's real strength in numbers. And now having all these stories in the public domain shows midwives that this is happening. You're not alone. It's not safe and it's not acceptable. And it needs to be escalated, it needs to be changed. And I have heard some isolated reports from midwives in different pockets around the UK saying, my management are talking about your campaign, our road has been changed, and we're getting our breaks now. So, even if that only happens in a couple of isolated instances, it's like, well, maybe that's prevented some harm that we won't even ever know about, even if it's only, in one or two cases, it's something. So we're just coming up to 22:08. So I think, do we want to start some questions, Sue, or I can certainly keep waffling on?
I think there's some questions have come through.
Yep. Great.
So thank you, Leah. That's really interesting, the whole story. And thank you for sharing the whole story, because it kind of puts it all properly into context, and any of us can be in the same situation. And what I love is the idea that in some trusts, somewhere, somebody's thought, hang on, this isn't right. What can we do? Because it is possible. And some of this, it kind of reminds me of practices. I had the same sort of format of working the day in the hospital and then being on call from basically from 8 till 8 in the morning, and it was exhausting, and that was a wee while ago. And to be able to address that is really important. I think somebody will have prevented having a problem. So that was a lovely bit of the story. Now I've got some questions coming through, and it's all coming on my phone. I don't have to look at the other screen at the moment. This is my new pesky computer with gremlins. Anyway, Gillian, hi Gillian. Gillian is saying, can you tell us a bit more about the response of RCM to your concerns? That might be tricky. That might be tricky.
I can tell you a little bit more. I can give you the kind of bare bones of it. So I will preface this by saying I'm a huge believer in trade unions. I was a member of the RCM since my early student days. So for, I guess, 15 years that was. And that was my first thought when all of this came up, is that I must deliver this information to the union because this is what they do, right? Their members are in danger, and, consequently service users are in danger as well. So this is an employment, issue. You don't need to know exactly who I met with or exactly what was said, but the outcome was essentially that it wasn't a campaign that the RCM in general could support, and that midwives needed to just kind of support each other. And that's all I can really say about that. And that's all. I did say that on social media because lots of people were expecting, what's the outcome? What's going to happen here? So that's all I'll say. That's okay. There's no bad blood. There's no ill will. I wish the outcome had been different, but that's what it was. Since then, there have been some statements slightly warming to the campaign, making nicer noises, but it didn't end up being the collaborative kind of effort I had hoped it would be. And that's okay. I'm sure they've got their reasons. I'm no longer a member of the RCM. I think a lot of people were similarly disappointed in that outcome, but we can leave it there. And I know they're doing lots of good work, and I wish them all the best.
I have to say, and I mean, I would have thought, and I'm also an RCM member, obviously. But I'm aware of the local officers who they're representing members. I would have thought if you reported something like this to them and they didn't know, they would take action. But maybe that's another thing about raising awareness, and it would help ultimately, I'm hoping anyway.
Yeah, I still, when people are messaging me saying, what can I do about this? I still absolutely say, speak to your local union rep about it. And I would hope, I think there is actually a lot of support for this at local level, at regional level as well. So I would still encourage people to do that.
I think that's useful, because actually gathering that sort of evidence locally is more than one person can possibly cope with.
Yes.
And your 41,000 signatures. And what I'd also say, as it floats through my brain, is those 41,000 signatures, I'm presuming, are mostly midwives, student midwives. Midwives and student midwives, you've got family members who could all sign that petition. So, and I'm aware, as I'm doing activist work myself, it doesn't have to be one person in the whole family, one person in the household. Get everyone involved. So how about getting up to 100,000 people? That'd be quite good, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And I'm encouraging people, share it on the school run, tell your auntie, your cousin, your husband, whoever. People have been doing that. And there's actually some great comments. So on change.org, you can leave a comment. And there some of the first comments to come through were from men saying, I'm a lorry driver. I'm drive a train. I think it's outrageous that I have these protections and my midwife partner doesn't, or, so on. And really, I think a lot of other people are coming on board with it.
Fab. That's interesting to know too. And Gillian, and I'm not sure if it's the same Gillian, is now saying, what opportunities are there for staff to take legal action against their employers for failures in their duty of care to their staff when they can demonstrate harm resulting from excessive hours, which is something you alluded to in your presentation.
Yes, so again, I'm not an expert in employment law. I wish I was, because I probably would have done a much better job of all this if I knew the ropes a bit more. But yeah, I've got kind of other things to do. But what I will say is there are solicitors out there who specialize in employment law, and I'm sure many of them would be very happy to give you, most lawyers do like a free initial consultation to discuss things generally with you if you feel that you have a case. So yeah, see how you go with that. But unfortunately, it's not my area of expertise.
But the free advice is useful, but also
Free advice,
again locally if you can initially too.
Yeah.
And Emily, good question. Hi, Emily, is saying, what have been the justifications you've been getting back from NHS trusts? Our audience are fabulous, aren't they?
Yeah, wow, you guys are really going for the jugular. You ask all the hard questions. So justifications, well, darling, the NHS does not justify. They do not explain. They, yes, so some of them have answered my questions, but they do not really expound. Some of the answers are one-liners. Some of them are a little bit more in-depth. Yeah, I think when trusts are giving written information to a member of the public, they obviously don't want to leave any room for further questioning or doubt about whether things are safe. So everything is very carefully worded. I initially thought maybe I can, share every one of these FOI replies, but I'm actually not sure strictly about the legality of that, even although it's publicly available information. I'm not sure exactly if I'm allowed to share. And I'm probably in enough trouble already, so that's I don't need to add that. But what I will say generally is they don't really explain. They just say this is our procedure, or we don't have a procedure, or we don't have that information, and they don't tend to really justify.
That's interesting. I mean, I was interested in the opting out of regulations and people being asked to opt out. That's something I don't think I've ever come across.
I had not come across it. I was really shocked by this, and it started to emerge as a theme in some of the direct messages I was getting, and I thought, surely this can't be right. So that's why I included it as one of my questions in my FOI inquiries. And yeah, so in some places, when you are taken on, part of your sort of induction process is being asked to opt out of the working time regulations and then to sign that you have done so voluntarily. Now, somebody did tell me that they didn't feel comfortable with that. They thought it seemed a bit funny, and asked if they could still sign their contract and not opt out of the working time regs. And they were told, feel free to not opt out, but you won't get a job. So it's kind of like voluntary, but not really voluntary. And I then sought advice. So when I discussed this with an employment lawyer, I said, this doesn't seem right at all. Correct me if I'm wrong. And yes, it's not right. But also, interestingly, even if you opt out of the working time regulations, your breaks are still protected. So it's sort of like you can opt out, but you're still covered for most things.
Okay.
Which I don't think a lot of people understand. It's very complicated. Again, the legal intricacies are confusing. And I just think anytime you're told you can only have this job if you sign this thing, but let's pretend that you did it voluntarily, that doesn't sit right with me.
No. Well, especially at the moment where people are being told they might not get a job.
Well, exactly.
You might do anything to make sure you got that job.
Exactly. And also, it's one thing to opt out of a protection, then that should be time limited. It should be specified, under what circumstances. Is this for emergencies only? Is this only for the next 6 months? And it's just a very open-ended thing. So it doesn't seem to make any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. God. Oh, dear. We're all learning tonight. Thank you, Leah.
Really learning.
And I've got Priscilla Poole. Hi, Priscilla. And she's saying, I'm from Manchester. Good on you, Priscilla. And she's signed and shared your petition.
Oh, thank you very much.
Excellent, most excellent. And then we've got now Gillian is asking a question. I think the this is a bit tricky because we've raised this, or you've raised this a little bit. So she said, would you consider inviting the midwives who responded to you to join together to consider a class action with legal advice?
Well, I mean, anytime I get an update or I meet with an expert like a lawyer or whatever, I'm trying to kind of then share on Instagram, because that's where people are mainly following, and say, I did post and I said, I've spoken to this lawyer and she's advised this thing. Now, I wouldn't feel comfortable personally pulling everybody together and being part of this, because I'm just the conduit, right? I'm just like putting it out there. But yes, I'm absolutely encouraging people, if they think they have a legal case, to seek advice and see what you can do.
Because there's a lot of when you're thinking about taking legal action, there's a lot of things to be considered.
Yes,
which I'm saying to the audience. So, you have to think yourself about whether it's right for you and in your role in your job and with other colleagues, because it's a very tricky thing, and you can get committed to something that might get more difficult. So thank you, Leah. That's really helpful. And then Emily, oh crikey. Emily's I'm going to go on to a comment from Monique in Milton Keynes. We've got people from all over this evening.
Great.
And she says, most of us student midwives are very fearful of the lack of jobs after working so hard for 3 years to achieve our degrees. Local trusts had dozens of interviewees and only a handful were offered a job. That breaks my heart, Monique, it really does. Surely more midwives, especially recently qualified ones, could ease the pressures faced by midwives in practice. Why is it so difficult to get a job once qualified? And that's a massive one. And it's about, I guess it's about some trusts holding some vacancies because of saving money. It's like this thing about beds. People talk about beds, let's open some beds, but it's not about the bed. It's about the people, looking after the people in the bed. And it's kind of it's quite difficult. It is difficult. Monique, I hope you're one of the successful people who got a job, and if not now, very soon. And thank you for the comment.
Yeah, just on that note, actually, what I meant to say earlier, I looked up on my phone for people who want to follow the campaign by the student midwives who are organizing next week's gathering demo. They've just started an Instagram page, and it's called, I think it's Fund Future Midwives UK, all one word. So if you look up that account on Instagram, it'll have updates about the gathering and sort of details and things. So follow them there.
Fabulous. Thank you, Leah. That's really useful. We'll put that on the link as well.
Yeah. I'm just going to double check. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it's called.
That's grand. Yeah. And then there's Emily. And Emily says, do you think there should be a way to check what each trust does to protect hours to enable midwives to choose with their feet where to work? She was a bit disappointed with the RCM's response, but that might be an initial response, to be fair to the RCM. And sometimes it's not always clear how big a problem is, and this is a big problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, as I said before, don't want to badmouth the RCM. They're doing their work, I'm doing my thing, and maybe we'll come together at some point in the future. But in terms of like being able to shop around, in a sense, for trusts that have the best working cultures, I suppose the best thing really is to speak to people who work there, because they'll be the ones on the ground that can tell you what it's really like. Also, anyone can submit a freedom of information request to a trust. So even if you work there or you live in that city or town or whatever, you can actually, just go online and Google FOI, blah, 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 the name of the trust. And there usually is like an online form, or there's an email address, and it's actually very simple and straightforward. It's not a big long, you don't need to be an expert to do it. So if you have specific questions that you want to ask about how a trust operates, it's, we live in a democracy. You can do that. So go for it.
Or go and visit the unit if that's possible.
Yeah.
Talk to midwives there and student midwives. You get a good feel of what a place feels like and how cared for the staff feel. Thank you, Leah. Now, and the other thing that was the model, I was interested in them. I don't know if you were able to get to that kind of issue, but I was thinking if you've got models of care or group practice midwifery, do you have the same sort of issues rising where the group practice have got more control over the way they're working?
So you mean if you're in like a case loading team sort of thing? Yeah. I have heard anecdotally that case loading teams do tend to manage a bit better because it's all internal, so they can sort of coordinate their own schedules and help each other out and things. What some people have told me is that the downside of that is sometimes because nobody's looking over your shoulder to check that you're not working crazy hours, you can say, oh, well, I'll just work the day into the night to help you out, or to because I know this woman and she's, wants me there, and you can actually put yourself in danger because, out of your own goodwill, you work a, crazy, stupid shift. But yeah, I do hear that, case loading tends to be a little bit safer in terms of hours and relieving each other and things. Yeah.
I suppose that's the negative side of some autonomousness in a practice where you might just be tempted to just yourself impose extra hours. And I do think sometimes we do that, and we do it for the best possible reasons. But I think, Leah, what you've really underlined is the importance for us as individuals, because the end part is that we hurt ourselves and we could hurt mums and babies, which is obviously very important to us. I think this is fantastic, and thank you so much. I've got one last question now, because I always say this is the fastest hour in the week, and it certainly is tonight. I've got Chris Thunes, hi Chris, who says, are there any other ways to get involved for non-Instagram users? Good question.
Good question. Yeah. I have a funny relationship with social media, and a part of me really hates Instagram, but I have just found that for whatever reason, it's where my people are most engaged, and I can share things immediately. And I understand if you don't like it or don't engage with it, don't do Facebook. I refuse to do TikTok. I am on LinkedIn, but like in a really boring way. We do have a Substack also. If you look on Substack and you search for my name, or the name of my Substack newsletter is Body of Work, I occasionally post on there. Really, if you want to get involved specifically in this campaign, just sign and share the petition. Please do send the link to as many people as you can. You can write to your MP, voice your concern, make it known that you demand answers as a constituent about how the government is dealing with this. You also can write to the Royal College of Midwives. You can write to the NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and let them know this is an issue of public safety. So there are definitely other kind of old-fashioned ways, but very effective ways that you can participate.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Leah. And it's old-fashioned or new-fashioned. We need to all be able to use the resources and the social media that suits us.
Yes.
I'm not an Instagram, but I do have an Instagram thing, but I don't automatically go there first. But we can all use different ways of getting through. And actually, the biggest help for me, I've found, is talking to people. So someone who's an Instagrammer, I'll link up to and say, what's cooking? That's what we need to do. Anyway, as I said, this hour has gone like a flash, and I think we'll need to have Leah back at a later point, maybe after the Amos review has come through, and maybe a further on the story when you've got your 100,000 signatures on that petition, which I hope we'll get to. That would be absolutely fantastic. So huge thank you to Leah for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to Angelo, who's making sure this is all taped up and ready for a link Friday morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and next Thursday on the newsletter. If you're new to the Maternity Hour and you haven't signed up for the Maternity and Midwifery Forum newsletter, do sign up. It's free, but you do get fantastic information hot off the press. So that's really useful. So thank you to Paul, who's been sending through the questions to my phone for me, which is fantastic. And I'll just say that next week we have Nikki Clark, who's going to be talking about the consequence of the rising caesarean section for midwifery. And so please do join us there, same time, same place. Look after yourselves. And thank you so much for coming this evening to everyone, including our lovely Leah. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, said, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone